Hello there, my name's Scott and today I'm going to be doing a review on the Nucleus rebuildable dripping atomiser which I received from www.koreavape.com. Before I start though, I must point out I did receive it free of charge for purpose of conducting a review, but my opinion of the product remains true, honest and accurate as always. I also need to point out that this is just a prototype version of the Nucleus. It's not the full and final product, so if it does look a little bit rough around the edges, just take that into consideration because it is a prototype. Okay, let's go straight ahead and show you in a bit more detail. Okay, so here I have the Nucleus dripping atomiser, which is manufactured by Mojo. And before I go on, I do need to stress that this is just a prototype version. It's not the full and final retail version. So anything that looks a little bit rough and ready, any sort of scratches or blemishes, any sort of slightly iffy drilling on the holes there, for example, do take that with a pinch of salt because, like I said, it is a prototype. It's 22mm in diameter and I'm measuring it at 26mm from the very edge there to the top edge there in length. There is also going to be a 23mm diameter version as well, which is going to come with like a hybrid adapter kit so you can screw it straight onto a Chi-U. The final retail version is going to be mainly made out of 304 grade stainless steel and brass, and I think a lot of the important parts are also going to be rhodium coated as well. Now, I think it's fair to say that this atomiser has been designed mainly for people who like to do the more sort of adventurous coil setups, such as quad coils, etc. And for those people who like to do the older cloud chasing. And it's got a really nice feature inside of here. We can take out the main sort of area where you're going to be working on your coils. You can work on your coils separately and then install it all afterwards. And it does make it a little bit easier to sort of manoeuvre, let's put it that way. And obviously I will show you that as we progress. Okay, so as it's a prototype, I don't want to spend sort of too much time on it, so I'm going to give you a very quick guided tour of some of the main features, and then I'll show you how I've been getting my one all set up. Okay, so starting from the base, you're going to find a 510 connection. No adjustable centre pin though, which is a little bit of a shame. However, this is the prototype, so hopefully on the final retail version, there will be one. On the side of the main body, you're going to find a set of 3 air holes on one side, and another set of 3 air holes on the opposite side, and according to my measurements the diameter of these holes is 2mm. So the idea is that if you're going to set it up with a quad coil, then obviously you're going to have all 4 air holes open to allow air to pass over each coil. But if you want to set it up with a dual coil though, then what you need to do is use just a central hole on each side, then that will actually shut off 2 of the extra holes and just leave 2 in operation. On top you're going to find space for a 510 drip tip. And as you can see, going around the outside edge, you have some engravings saying Nucleus and style of Mojo. Now this outside ring here, I believe is one of the parts which is going to be rhodium coated. And if you grab hold of it and give it a bit of welly, it will actually spin around. However, the fact that it spins doesn't actually serve any purpose whatsoever. Okay, so the top cap doesn't have a reduced chamber or anything sort of fancy like that. And I would imagine on camera this probably doesn't look too pretty either, but again I just want to stress, bear in mind that this is a prototype version and not the full retail version. The exciting part about this atomiser though is this section here, and this is where you're going to be installing your wicking coils. Now you may be thinking, well, how are you going to do that, because there's no room to manoeuvre, it looks extremely fiddly. But what you're going to do is actually remove this whole section here. This then allows you to get your coils all set up with loads of room to manoeuvre, nice and easy. Once all set up, you just drop it back in, do the screw up, and you're good to go. And also we'll show you that in the next step. Going around the outside, you have your air holes. You have 2 on one side and 2 on the opposite side. This allows you to have air flowing over each coil, regardless of whether it's a dual coil or a quad coil setup. And it uses a double O-rings there to get a really good grip of the top cap. Okay, so here I have all the parts that make up the Nucleus stripper. So that's going to be the base section, which has the 510 connection, and that central shaft there is going to be your positive. You then have the top cap, which like I said has a total of 6 air holes, and each air hole is around 2mm in diameter. Then have a small screw, which again is going to act as part of the positive. And then finally you have this small component here, which is going to be used for connecting your coils. Now as you can see, it's made up of 2 different metal halves. The top half is going to be acting as your positive and the bottom half is going to be acting as your negative. So when you connect up your coils, you want to make sure that one end of the wire is going into the top section and the other end of the wire is going into the bottom section, rather than going from left to right. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show you one of the methods that I've been using to set up the Nucleus stripper. It's quite a basic sort of method. It's not too extreme, but it is one that still works really well though. Now, if you're going to use any sort of quad coil setup or sub-ohm vaping or sort of extreme sub-ohm vaping, please make sure you're using a battery that is actually up for the job. Because, you know, some of the cases I've seen on the net recently have been quite worrying, where people are using sort of like, you know, 0.1 ohm resistant quad coils using an 18350 battery, and you know, things like that, you know, really do scare me. Now I prefer to sort of err on the side of caution and try not to push the batteries too far. So I'm going to use a quad coil setup. However, each coil has a resistance of 2.4 ohms. So 2.4 divided by 4 equals 0.6. So the total combined resistance is going to be 0.6 ohms, which is still, you know, pretty low, but well within the capabilities of the battery that I'm going to be using. Okay, to try and keep the overall length of the video down a little bit, I'm not going to worry too much about showing you me actually wrapping a bit of wire around a bit of wick 4 times over. So instead what I've done is I've already got my wicks and my coils already sort of pre-made and ready to go. So for my wire, I'm going to be using some 0.20mm Canthal, and as you can hopefully see, I've wrapped 8 coils around a length of eco wool, which is 2mm in diameter. Okay, so I'm going to start off then by just loosening off the terminals, and as you can see, it uses a small Allen key. Now, it didn't come supplied with an Allen key, but I have found out you need a 1.3mm one, and that's probably the only size I don't actually own, so instead I've just been using this little blunt screwdriver. I'm then going to take one of the Wickham coils that I've got made up and insert one end of the wire through the lower half of the metal section and the other end of the wire through the top half of the metal section. And then I'm going to repeat that exact same process but coming from the opposite side. Then holding them both in place, I can take the screwdriver and just tighten up the terminals. And then once you've tidied them up, you should have something that looks a bit like this. Now, to remove the excess pieces of wire, you can use a pair of cutters, though it is quite hard to sort of get right in there. And what I prefer to do is just grab hold of the wire, apply a little bit of tension, give it a spin and a wiggle, and it should hopefully snap off nice and clean. Okay, so that is one side complete now, and as you can see, I've just taken a little screwdriver out, just sort of evened up the coils and tried to make them as evenly spaced out as possible. Now all I need to do is repeat the exact same process on the opposite side, and what you end up with is something that looks like this. Now the tails of the wick on this side are a little bit too long at the moment, so what I'm going to do is just take a pair of cutters and trim them up a little bit, probably around sort of 15mm long, something like that. Okay, so once all your coils are installed and ready to go, you can take this section, insert it over the central shaft there, push it down to the bottom, and just line up your wicks in front of the air holes. And then whilst holding it all still in place, just take the screw, drop that into the top, and use the screwdriver to tighten it up. Okay, so just to speed things along again, what I've done is I've packed the wick down to the bottom of the base there, and this will soak up the liquid when I direct drip onto it. And I've also made sure that the air holes aren't blocked as well, and if I give it a quick test fire, we should hopefully see some coils lighting up. It will take a little while because they are quite high resistance each, but there you go. And what I'm going to do now is just quickly give the resistance a bit of a check. Okay, so I've just attached it onto my pipeline probe because I want to quickly check the resistance. And like I said, I'm hoping to get a total resistance of around 0.6 ohms. If I give this a press, it's come out at 0.6 on the dot. Lovely. Okay, so I've just added some e-liquid to the wicks there, give them a good soak in. If I press the button, I should see a little bit of action. And it seems to be fine. So what I'm going to do now is take the top cap, place that on there. And obviously when I do this, I need to make sure that the two outside air holes here are going to line up with the two air holes there, which is a little bit tricky to be quite honest. It's quite hard to judge, but it should be about right. If I put it all the way down, yep, that's okay. As you can see on both sides there. And then finish it off by whacking my drip tip in the end now. Okay, so that is the Nucleus dripper. Let's go ahead, see what it vapes like. Okay, so that was the Nucleus, and what I'll do now is go ahead and show you an action. So I'm going to be using it on a Buffalo mod, which is also made by Mojo. I'm using it with an 18650 battery that has just come off the charger, so it should still be reading around 4.2 volts. The total combined resistance has indeed come out at exactly 0.6 ohms, which is nice. And I'm currently using some 18mg strength rhubarb and custard flavoured e-liquid. Not too sure what the PG-VG ratio is, but I'm pretty certain there is a bit of VG in there. Okay, so this is the Nucleus. So, you know, as you can see, getting loads of vapour out of it. Obviously, just bear in mind that the amount of vapour you're going to get is going to be totally down to how you got it set up with regards to the resistance. You may have a quad coil set up in there, you might have a dual coil set up in there, you may have micro coils, regular coils. It's going to come down to what sort of e-liquid you're using, whether it's PG or VG. You know, all these things will play a very big part in the actual amount of vapour production you're going to get, but nevertheless, with the setup I've got here, getting plenty of vapour out of it. Obviously, I am doing the old direct lung inhales here because, you know, I think this video or this atomizer is made specifically for people who like doing the old cloud chasing. You know, you've got the quad coil capabilities, you've got the 4 large air holes there, and you know, when in Rome, do as Romans do. So I've set it up to do the old cloud chasing, and I'm trying to actually sort of do the lung inhales to produce the most amount of vapour. It's not too bad with just a sort of a normal regular mouth inhale, and I will demonstrate that. You know, still pretty respectable vapour really, but if you're going to compare that to a sort of slightly longer direct lung inhale, then you do notice a big old difference, and I'll demonstrate that now. As you can see, so basically, you know, you can make as much vapour, as big a cloud as you bleeding want really. And also just bear in mind that this is a pretty sort of standard sort of setup really. I know it's 0.6 ohms, which is pretty low, but you know, each coil is only 2.4 ohms. Obviously 2.4 divided by 4, that gives you that 0.6 total resistance. And if that's the amount of vapour that I'm creating with that sort of setup, you know, if you are one of these sort of hardcore cloud chasing addicts who likes to sort of you know, push the batteries to the extreme and with your really sort of low sub-ohm coils, then if this is the amount of vapour I'm getting out of it with my setup, imagine what you can do with it with your sort of setups, you know. But I know a lot of people will probably say, why did you use, you know, 2.4 ohm coils and set it up like that, you know. But at the end of the day, I want to sort of try and vape safely from my own sort of personal perspective. I don't want to sort of push the batteries too hard. And I also feel like I've got a little bit of responsibility as well to the people who actually watch my videos to sort of try and show to them that you don't need to go sort of super sub-ohm to still be able to get a really good amount of vapour. You can still sort of vape safely and still produce really nice big clouds. So it all comes down to personal preference. So, you know, if you want to sort of set it up, you know, really low and sort of push the boundaries of your battery, as long as it's you're trying to be as safe as you possibly can, then that's great. But for me personally, you know, I want to sort of try and be well within the capabilities of the battery that I'm using. Live and let live, basically. You know, that's just, it's a ridiculous amount of vape. If I went into a restaurant in Romford, you know, where I live, and I sat down, I was having my cup of coffee after a nice meal, and I was vaping one of these and producing clouds like that, you know, I'd be frog marks off the premises straight away. You just wouldn't be able to get away with it, you know. So for me, that's a ridiculous amount of vapour, and I'm more than happy to just have a regular single coil, you know, a few wraps of 28 gauge Canthal, you know, to take a sort of 2 or 3 second long drag, get a nice amount of vapour, not massive clouds, just a decent amount of vapour, a decent amount of flavour and flow hit, and that is more than enough to satisfy me. However, every now and again, I must admit it is quite nice to set up an atomiser like this, because it's very much like the older sort of shisha experience. I haven't sort of done any sort of shisha stuff for many years now, but it was quite nice to be able to sit there, you know, with those long old pipes and just sort of toke away in that. And so this is probably the closest I can get to sort of replicating that experience without actually sort of using sort of tobacco shisha again, you know. So every now and again it is nice to sort of do a bit of the old cloud chasing. Obviously, you know, it's got the quite large air holes. It's got 6 of them. 2 are in use or 4 are in use, depending on what way you've got it set up. Now, in theory, sorry, just backtracking. As far as I can tell, from my sort of rough measurements, each air hole is around sort of 2 millimeters in diameter. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it in its sort of full, or have to use it fully open. Obviously, if you twist the top cap on as you put it down slightly, because you've got 2 holes which are sort of overlapping, you know, you can have an adjustable jaw really from 0 up to 2 millimeters. It's just that if I'm going to be doing cloud chasing, then I'm sort of going to make sure the air hole is in its sort of most wide open. But obviously, if you do prefer to have all 4 holes open but a slightly tighter jaw, then obviously you can do that as well, just by sort of misaligning them slightly. One thing I really liked about the Atomiser is the way that you connect up your coils. Obviously, when you start doing quad coils, it does start getting a little bit messy and a little bit more sort of fiddly and that, because obviously there's more stuff that you've got to do basically. But it's good that you can actually take that part out and work on it properly. And when you're not doing it in the camera whilst trying to look at a monitor, you know, it's definitely a lot easier. I probably sort of made it look quite difficult in my close-up shots, but when you're not sort of having to worry about actually record what you're doing and actually look at what you're doing as well, then it's you know, it's relatively sort of straightforward and simple really, and you can sort of experiment quite a bit. Now, obviously, I showed you with the 4 coils, 2.4 ohms, just using 0.20 millimeter Canthal around a bit of a 2 millimeter eco wall. But I think one of the better setups that I've tried since I've had the Nucleus is just a dual coil setup. So that's just 2 coils obviously, but both of them have been micro coils and 2 ohms each to give you a combined total resistance of 1 ohms. And you just have the 2 air holes open, and I'd say it's performing just as well as what you're seeing here now. It's still getting like, you know, really loads of clouds, but it's just a little bit sort of quicker and simpler to set up. And like I say, you know, it performs probably just as well as what this quad coil setup is at the moment. So that was probably my sort of preferred setup out of all the ones that I've tried anyway. I did want to show you that in the close-up shots, but I thought as it's an atomiser that's primarily for sort of cloud chasing and quad coils, I thought if I don't do a quad coil setup, then I'm probably going to get a few people complaining, so that's why I went with the quad coil setup for the close-up shots. It's quite hard for me to talk about things like build quality when it's a prototype, and you know, what I've got here, you know, in terms of performance, you know, vapor excellent, flavour excellent, flow heat excellent, etc, etc. Also, build quality wise, it is a little bit rough around the edges. You know, the holes aren't sort of drilled overly neatly. The inside of the top cap looks quite disgusting, but to be quite honest, I've not noticed any sort of negative effect on that though. And obviously the finish on it was quite sort of scuffed, and a few little sort of faint scratches and that as well, and that is how it actually came to me. So it's hard for me to sort of talk about build quality when you consider that it is a prototype. I'm absolutely positive that the final retail versions will be sort of a far, far better quality in terms of the sort of finish and like the quality of the drilling, etc, etc. So any negatives you see with regards to the build or the finish, you know, please take it with a pinch of salt, because it is just a prototype version. You know, not too sure what else I can really tell you about it, to be quite honest. It's just it's a very nice stripping atomizer. You've got lots of sort of options with it. I like the fact that you can take out that central part and wrap your coils up separately and work on them separately, and then just sort of drop it in there and install it that way. Definitely makes it a little bit easier compared to if it was all sort of fixed in place and trying to wrap those 4 coils and getting them all joined up. In terms of performance, you can't really knock it. If you're a cloud chaser, this is probably going to be right up your street. Like I said, I've got this vaping like this at the moment with a pretty sort of boring setup compared to most sort of cloud chasers setup. So if you are one of those guys who likes to sort of push the boundaries a little bit, you can imagine what you're going to be able to get out of this sort of atomizer. You know, so I think what I'll do is I'll just leave it with one big sort of long cloud, and then wrap it out, so I'll have one more really nice long toke. You know, absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so if you do fancy trying one of these out for yourself, go along to www.koreavape.com. Thank you very much for watching. Also come along and visit my website at www.e-cig-reviews.com. That's e-cig-reviews.com. Cheers guys, happy vaping. See you later.